In this video, we're going to explore the story so far. Why John Wick is such a deadly force. What happens in John Wick for the ending. To the future of the John Wick series as a whole. As I said in the past, there are few things in life that are certain. Like our impending debts. The fact that we all have to pay taxes. And how pissing of John Wick is the fastest way to meet Jamaica. Baba Yaga, it was just a fucking car. Just a fucking dog. You can either hand over your son, or you can die screaming alongside him. John Wick introduced us to the dark, sleek and well-dressed underground criminal society, filled with assassins who for the most part seem to abide by code of conduct. Yeah. Gentlemen, do I need to remind you that there will be no business conducted on the Continental grounds. Each subsequent film uncovered more layers and the unique hierarchy and roles that governed his world, controlled by members of a secret organization known as the High Table, which we'll get into shortly. Gentlemen, this institution is now deconsecrated. High Table emissaries will be joining you presently to see the removal of your souls from the property. The remaining constant is that Jodani is a man in peak physical condition, possessing incredible strength, stamina, reflexes, durability and agility for a man of his age, along with a ridiculously high pain tolerance that enables him to push where most men would give up. Having trained in a school for assassins, along with the Marines, is an expert marksman with phenomenal proficiency for headshots and a master martial artist that can use his body and improvise weapons to bring his foes down. He has ninja-like stealth, is a master technician and an expert driver that can use his car as effectively as his gun. He even has great knowledge of the human and physiology, aiding in his ability to take people down as ruthlessly as possible, as well as help him take care of his own body. Injured. I also believe that his affable demeanor, with his preference to avoid fights when he can, his friendly and professional manner, and his strong sense of honor, went a long way for Wick, who is both feared and respected amongst his peers. John, you working afraid, so? This enabled him to develop strong ties with a handful of people he closely trusted as friends, putting their relationships and lives in danger as the series has progressed. John, get to it. You shouldn't be here. I was almost up. I still have 5 minutes. Please, Mr. Wick. They'll never believe I stopped on the hour. But she did. They'll know. Know what I told you where the medicine was. We're here just below my floating rib. Be sure not to hit my... Oh wait. One may not be enough. But what makes him stand out from everyone else, and what I believe to be his greatest asset, is his indomitable will and anger that go hand in hand with his pursuit for vengeance and retribution, in the kind of style that only Giga like Keanu Reeves could deliver. In the John Wick comic series, written by Greg Pak and illustrated by Giovanni Valletti, we learn that John was an orphan born in Belarus who spent his youth thieving in the streets. Trained by the director, the head of the Roscoe that operated a school for assassins, Jodani was put through a strict training regimen that included a mixture of ballet and combat to ensure that recruits were not only good at killing, but also masters of movement. After leaving the Roscoe, Wick served in the United States Marine Corps. He then left the military and became a freelance hitman that was eventually introduced into the ways of the Continental by Karen. The comic showed his first induction into the Maria crime family as their death dealer, paving the way for his transition from an amateur to a professional boogeyman. Within a few years, John began developing a reputation for his lethal efficiency, and he became highly respected and feared within the criminal underworld, with all the top bosses in the mafia and criminal organizations seeking his employment. At some point, he began working for Russian mobster Viggo Tarasov, who deeply valued Wick as an associate for his persistence, seeming invincibility, and unparalleled skill. Once killed 3 men in one bar with a pencil. I know I've heard the stories fucking pencil. After years of bloody service to the terrorists, Wick met a woman named Helen
that he'd fallen in love with.
He asked Vigo's permission to leave, and the gangster reluctantly agreed on the condition that he completed an impossible task.
Killing all of his rivals in a single day.
Impossible for most, but for John, it was Friday.
Wick sought the help of Santino D'Antonio
for manpower and equipment. In exchange, he made a blood oath by giving him a marker, an unbreakable vow, to do any task Santino asked of him in the future. Upon completing the deed, John was finally freed from his service to Vigo, and the Boggy Yaga retired from his life of crime. Following the death of his wife to illness, Wick stayed away from the world of organized crime, instead choosing to spend his days driving his prize car and caring for his daughter Daisy, left to him by Helen.
All of this would change
when Joseph Tarasov assaulted John, not realizing who he was.
Before killing his dog and stealing his car, the only two things left in the world that he loved.
What follows
is an inexorable siege against his former
with
boss,
John wiping out Vigo, his son,
along with their entire entourage of 77 trained killers.
Crawl my you must.
Oh.
Go. The sequel begins with John forming a truce with Tarasov's brother Abram, only to find Santino knocking at his door, requesting his services. No one gets out and comes back without repercussions. John Wick initially refuses, but with Santino blowing up his home and the fact that he gave him a marker, the indebted Wick reluctantly agrees to help Santino kill his sister, enabling him to take her seat at the high table. What brought you back, John, your brother? Though he completes the task, John is betrayed by Santino, who opens a $7 million contract under the guise of avenging his sister, forcing the Boggy Yaga to kill all 128 of his men, Lou says. Look out. Get off. While Santino escapes to the safety of the Continental, Wick breaks one of the major rules of the high table by killing him within hotel grounds, taking his death toll to a whopping 205 people within a week. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back. Unfortunately, things go from bad to us. Wick is involved by his friend Winston, the manager of the New York Continental. That, per the high table rules, the contract on John had now been doubled.
As a consequence of his killing a high table member.
Winston then declares John excommunicado, which meant that he would be losing all access
privileges to the global network,
in addition to having the full might of the high table
after his head.
Tell them all. Whoever comes, whoever it is, I'll kill them. The high table is basically a council of 12 that govern the Underworld's most powerful criminal organizations,
many of whom we've already met.
They are considered the ultimate global authority,
the underworld,
with many police forces,
politicians and bureaucrats in their pocket, allowing them to conduct business with virtual impunity.
There are 12 seats at the high table. The Chinese, the Russian, LED by the elder below him, and the 12 crime lords were their harbinger, an emissariat, collective voice of all the high table members, and the adjudicator, the main agent.
And in also the high table seen in John Wick 3.
Climb down off your high table and go F yourself. You gave John Wick 7 bullets. Your penance will be paid with 7 cuts. Long live the king.
Then we have the Continental Hotels,
the official operating grounds of organization members around the world, and the one-stop shop for rest weaponry, bulletproof style, and any other former supporters members might need. Is this Somalia?
I have never known him not to be.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wick. I'd like it tasting.
I know of your past fondness for the German varietals,
but I can wholeheartedly endorse the new breed of Austrians.
fled Magwell for easier reloads. And I know you'll appreciate the custom porting.
Shall I have everything, Centuryman?
Yes, thank you, excellent.
Seeking a way to remove the growing bounty on his head, John found the enigmatic elder,
who gave him a way to remove the contract. To do this, John was forced to give up his ring finger and wedding ring, swear undying filthy to the High Table,
and told that he needed to finally kill Winston
for aiding him.
Neither the open contract
nor the excommunicado will be lifted
until you complete your task. I will serve.
I will be of service.
After killing another 94 people in this film, he chooses not to kill Winston.
Instead, he's shot by his friend
in front of the adjudicated that have been
putting
hunting
Winston
him
and the New York Continental
back in the good greatest of the High Table. Don't see any other way. 1-2.
How do you feel you pissed, John, are you? Yeah, coming off the back of a whopping 299 kills.
Across the 1 week that spans the first 3 films, giving Wick an average of 40.7 kills per day.
The final film kicks things off with a bang. Aided by the Bowie King,
John Wick 4 has Kratos, the Boogeyman, continues one-man war against the Shadow Organization
that it once been a part of. A new day is dawning. No ideas, no wolves. No management.
In the sewers of New York, John is given a new bulletproof vest by the Bowery King,
who was also taking care of the pit bull
rescued from the pound. What I love about this film is that it incorporates multiple genres of action,
beginning with a homage to traditional westerns, returning to the Moroccan desert to confront the elder.
John shoots his bodyguards and bows down,
requesting to get his ring and freedom back, telling him that the ring was gone, like the elder before him, that nobody escaped their nature or the High Table. The elder explains that the only way John Wick would have freedom or peace, now or ever, would be through death, with the elder finally saying that he came a long way for nothing.
John stands up and says, not really executing the head of the High Table.
You see, the Boogeyman is fed up with the organization and now wants to see them burn for not letting him return to his quiet life of peace.
Partly furious,
and also a bit worried that death incarnate would come for them.
The High Table seek the help of an ambitious member, the Marquis Vincent de Gramo,
who was given the power of Auto Imperator,
essentially judge, jury and executioner. Played with delightful menace and arrogance by Bill Skarsgård, the Marquis is essentially tasked with using the infinite resources of the group to hunt and kill John,
while punishing those that helped him in return. He would get a powerful position at the High Table and potentially a shot at becoming the new elder. As a result,
he sends their harbinger to the New York Continental
to inform Winston and Sharon that the hotel was condemned, giving them an hour to evacuate the premises and appear before the Marquis. Clancy Brown brings Gravitasin Way to the harbinger, and despite only being in a handful of scenes,
he's the finality and conclusiveness of the High Table personified.
After being chastised
by the Marquis for failing to kill John,
Winston and Sharon are informed that they were
also. The pair are then horrified to see the hotel demolished
before the Marquis callously executes Sharon, forcing the former manager to live as an outcast. I have to say that this moment was especially painful,
with the recent passing of the phenomenal Lance Reddick,
who will sorely be missed. Knowing that John had already slaughtered hundreds of highly skilled men, the Marquis travels to his home in Paris and enlists the help of a blind,
retired master assassin named Kane,
who also happened to be an old friend of John. I use the term enlist loosely, of course, you see.
After being ordered by the High Table
not to see his daughter,
Kane literally blinded himself,
enabling him to be near her without breaking the rules. And despite the man saying that he was retired, the Marquis forces him to hunt John Wick,
explaining that refuser would leave the High Table. No choice but to respond by taking his daughter's life. With the number of his enemies rising and his friends dwindling, John heads over to the Osaka Continental to seek refuge from his friend
Shimazu Koji, whose drip is just as sharp as his katana. Hiroyu Kusanada delivers an admirable performance, with his Koji
commanding the same respect and honor as keen as Wick.
And although he's only in the film for a short time,
there is so much weight in the discussion he has with John,
asking him if he ever gave any how thought this would end.
Koji emphasizes the motif of the High Table
as a group that only gives life, or more aptly,
grants it in return for death,
something that reverberates continuously throughout the film.
The master also reminds Wick that friendship meant little when it's convenient,
and he's true to his word,
committing all of his employees and even his family to take on the high tables.
Endless supply of killers that arrive at the Osaka Continental to investigate,
believing it to be harboring John in a bombastic set piece
that most films would end on. The film provides us with an epic appetizer of martial
arts choreographic frenzy and damn near unparalleled visual action, with most of the killers wearing bulletproof suits.
The gunfer incorporates this into the action, having them using it as a shield
while also firing shots.
The added difficulty
of having them confront the fully armored
men we saw in the previous film also creates this new level to the choreography,
with headshots being used to merely incapacitate them temporarily until John or our other heroes got close enough to finish them off.
Don't get me wrong, the movie is self-aware of how ridiculous many of the scenarios are,
which often head into the realm of the hilariously absurd,
but it's played so deadpan by the actors that it works.
Despite John also getting involved in the carnage, the Marquis, second in command, and the near-limitless number of fully armored killers wipe out most of Koji's men, with Hiroyuki at 62, Kinu at 58, and Donnie at 59 years of age. It's incredible.
These men are still moving with the fluidity
in grace of guys half their age.
After Wick exterminates waves of killers, he engages in his first battle with Kane,
which is interrupted by a track named Mr. Nobody and his awesome dog, in a nice callback to the first film that kicked everything off.
Played by Shamir Anderson, Mr. Nobody is hunting John, but decides to let him go multiple times
until the contract money
is increased to an amount of his liking. He even saves his life a number of times to ensure that nobody claimed the contract before him, while Wick offered to stay and help Koji, telling John not to waste a gift that he gave him.
The injured master tells him to escape
before confronting their old friend Kane,
reminding him
that brotherhood should come before contractual obligations.
In the final bout between them, the injured Koji is no match for Kane, who is forced to kill his friend in front of his daughter Akira, feeling guilty, and knowing that the injured woman
would die if she confronted him now. He somberly encourages her to live
and hunt him down when she was ready. The equal to John in Koji is, of course,
brought to life by martial arts legend Donnie Yen, who gives Kane so much heart and humor.
Despite the precarious situation he's forced into, this point is definitely crucial to how the ending plays out.
And although some of the scenes, with him shooting people while dodging bullets as a blind man,
hit the realm of insanity,
Yen moves with such elegant purpose that it simply works. Especially with a bumping soundtrack
by Tyler Bates and Joel J.
Richard and Down Larson's innovative cinematography.
The camera work is critical to keeping our eyes glued to the screen in the same way that the choreography is. In many ways, I think that John Wick helped save,
or at least preserve, the action genre in its purest form.
The problem is that while traditional martial arts movies of the 80s 90 seconds prided themselves on continuous
shots to show how meticulous the choreography was,
Hollywood came in with the multiple
cut approach.
While this made it easier
for non-martial arts trained actors
and took away much of the legwork from
coming up with intricate movement in camera work, the result is that the audience can't see anything. A bold strategy
with no payoff,
but dizziness and limited satisfaction. As a love letter to the action greats and gun fu masterpieces like Hard Boiled,
the John Wick series
instead uses wide shots and continuous takes to show how the characters creatively use the environment in combat.
So not only do we have beautifully stylized action and performances from the actors and stuntmen that have poured months into getting the movement right,
and not only does the camera enable us to see everything clearly, but the environment is a character in and of itself.
Something Jackie Chan,
Donnie Yen and the likes of Jet Li
have tried to explain to Hollywood for decades. I never move my camera.
Always steady wide angle. Let him see.
I jumping down. I do the flight.
I do the fall. Showing his delight in playing cruel games.
With the siege of the Osaka Continental failing, the Marquis stabs the hand of the tracker
when he demanded more money in return for killing John. giving him the option of either pulling the knife or damaging his hand by pulling it away from the knife.
to show filthy through pain.
Vincent de Grumore watches with joy as Mr.
Nobody does the latter. While all of this is happening, the bounty on John continues to rise,
hitting a staggering 20 million.
The Marquis is so sure of
That
himself
he doesn't realize his actions are quickly leading him towards consequences he may not like.
Not only is Winston furious that he killed and destroyed his home, but nearly everybody he forces into his employment, including Kane, join him unwillingly, often putting them in a position
where they choose to sneakily side with Wick.
Returning to New York to meet with Winston
At Sharon's grave, the Bagheera is informed that,
according to the old ways, John could be free of his obligation
to the High Table forever by challenging the Autor Imperator to a duel. As per the High Table tradition,
John needs a second to support his motion, in this case Winston.
But he also cannot request a duel
without support of one of the 12 crime families.
And so, with John having cut ties to the Roscaroma,
he heads to Berlin, requesting a new crest from his adoptive
uncle, of course. With the High Table having begun to punish
all those associated with John Wick, the reception is frosty.
His adoptive sister, Katia, informs him that Pewter was executed by Killer Harkin,
the head of the German crime family, and his senior at the High Table.
Although they initially plan on turning him over to the High Table,
they agreed to give him what he wanted in exchange for killing the man that executed Katia's father, in a flamboyant performance matched by the roundhouse kicks that only Scott can pull off in a fat suit.
The actor brings the larger-than-life asthma puffing
Kung Fu gangster the screen. Met by Kane and the Tracker,
who take a seat beside him
inside the Crime Lord's nightclub before begin a poker game,
surrounded by Killer's 50 or so armed henchmen to decide who lived and died.
With the scoundrel
cheating and setting his guards on Wick, the other two trained killers
assist him in wiping out Harkin's men,
and another slick action set piece. Wick is straight up headshotting and murdering
bad guys in the nightclub,
while people continue to rave. Yeah, Berlin is wild, and I'm Klaus.
John is very much a man who speaks through his actions,
and his actions speak for themselves.
In fact, one of the best parts of the
is
series
how the characters
are revealed through action without the use of dialogue.
Now, oh. Having completed his side of the agreement,
John gets a new Roscaroma crest branded onto his hand,
enabling Winston to hand letter to the Marquis, challenging him to a duel.
Realizing that he might have more than he can chew, the arrogant Marquis also reminds Winston that,
as John's second, if John were to fail, he too would be executed. Unfazed in leveraging the success of the duel to guarantee his reinstatement as a manager of the New York Continental
and the rebuilding of the hotel
at the High Table's expense, Winston tells him that such is life, and another sweet callback to his final discussion with his good friend Karen.
In a meeting that is moderated by the Harbinger, John and the Marquis arrange on the conditions of the duel,
choosing to fight at sunrise using pistols, showing he was just as much of a rule bender
as everyone else.
Duggerman nominates the reluctant
Kane to take his place in the duel, putting John up against his equal, and honestly,
probably wants his superior prior to blinding himself. More than this,
the Marquis does not intend on letting John climb the 200 steps of the Sacre-Cœur, that LED to the location of the duel, and so the bastard doubles the contract, putting a bounty of 40 million on John's head, turning the streets of Paris into a war zone,
with all nearby contract killers converging on his location.
In his final words to the Bowery King,
who gives him a new suit and weapons, and Winston,
John tells them that if he died,
he would like them to write loving husband on his tombstone, reminding us that not a day's gone by that he hasn't thought about Helen.
Featuring insane chases, where John is literally headshotting people that bounced off cars, using fire-breathing shotguns,
his hands pistols, and his indomitable will.
In addition to the amazing sweeping overhead shots reminiscent of Minority Report,
the power sequences indicated that perhaps even
Death was scared of approaching Wick.
Aided once again by Kane and Mr.
Nobody and his dog. When John chooses to end the person about to kill
the pooch instead of the tracker,
Johnny climbs all the stairs once again,
after being knocked down from the top by Sheedy in another over-the-top moment,
used to exemplify how overwhelming Wick's obstacles continue to be.
With Kane and Wick killing all that stood in their way and arriving exactly at sunrise, the rules of the duel are broken down.
Both will fire a shot from 30 paces away,
moving 10 paces closer each round,
until only one was left standing.
while both graze each other with the first
John
shot.
appears to severely maim his old friend in the second round. Remembering what code you said about friendship,
Meaning little when it's convenient.
Wick ultimately tells Kane that those that clung to life died, while those who clung to death lived.
He then intentionally doesn't fire a shot at 10 paces, enabling Kane to fire a crucial hit into Wick's stomach, quarterly pronouncing his victory. Damarky takes Kane's spot, telling him that his obligation was completed
and that his family was free.
But before he can fire his shot, Winston reminds him about the rules and consequences, the mark he had used to justify his actions, before revealing that John had yet
his
to
third
use
bullet. And with that, John fires a shot to his head,
killing the Auto Imperator and ending the Inquisition,
while taking his kill tally to a whopping 439 bad guys. As promised, the Harbinger tells Wick that he's free of any obligation
or dead to the High Table,
and that they would honor their agreement
with Winston apologizing for wounding his friend. Kane says goodbye before John asks Winston to take him home.
After finally gaining the freedom and
he'd
peace
long fought and killed to get,
John thinks of his wife Helen and collapses on the steps.
The final shot of the film is the Powery King,
John's dog and Winston, standing over the grave of Helen and John Wick,
which read loving wife and loving husband, respectively,
as per his last request, seemingly indicating that our hero had died.
But the ambiguity
in the King's next question,
and Winston's answer,
in addition to the illusion
and John's struggle to distance himself from the profession he wanted to retire from,
suggests a dual meaning,
which is supported by interviews with the producer, director Chad Stahelski,
and even Keanu Reeves. When the Barrow King asked Winston if John was now in heaven or hell,
Winston tells him he wasn't sure, prompting a huge chuckle from Fishburne and a puzzled look from Wick's dog.
The creative team all basically said that the character will rest for some time,
and depending on the success of this
and
film,
how receptive
viewers were, they would be interested
in the fifth film.
Let's not forget their intention was to initially make John Wick 4 and 5
back to back,
before that was halted by delays during the pandemic.
The post-credits
with
scene,
Akira approaching Kane and his daughter, and the fact that we don't see John Wick's dead body, leave it open for a sequel if Keanu Chad and the creative team
feel as though there's more to exploring the character
and world. But of course, Keanu is now in his late 50s, so if he ultimately decides Chapter 4 is where the story ends,
the film is the perfect conclusion
for his character. It's kind of poetic
that not even
death could kill
the ultimate top G.
Only he decided
when and how he would die, and when he did, it was done in the same way that lived his life,
by honoring his friends and loved ones,
and exacting
vengeance on soyboy
aristocrats
and evildoers.
If we find out
that John has faced his own death to avoid further trouble from the crime world
in his sequel,
his line about those
clinging to death living
would also have more resonant meaning.
With that said, there are a few things on the horizon for the John Wick universe.
Keanu was booked to appear
in the upcoming spin-off Ballerina. Set between the third and fourth film, it follows an assassin named Rooney
hunting down her family's killers.
Rooney was first featured
in John Wick 3
scene training under the tutelage of the director, the head of the Roscoe crime family. In addition to Keanu,
the film will also feature
Angelica Houston
and Ian McShane, reprising their roles
as a director,
and Winston,
in addition to Lance Rattica in his final appearance.
That was filmed before his death. It will also star newcomers
Norman Reedus, Gabriel Byrne,
and Catalina
Sandino Marino. An upcoming television series called The Continental,
set in the 70s,
will also explore how a young Winston,
revealed in John Wick 4, to also be a member of the Roscoe Roma,
won control
over the New York hotel
and safe haven for the High Table. Colin Woodall plays a young Winston. AMA Diedgon will take on Sharon. Katie McGrath is playing the Judicator. Emmy L. Gibson stars
as a new character
named Cormac,
likely an assassin,
while Peter Green
will play Uncle Charlie,
the cleaner
we saw in John Wick 1 and 2.
This is Wick. I'd like to make a dinner reservation for 12. With all of that said,
I love this movie and think the creative team
should be proud of what they've been able to achieve so far.
Hats off to Keanu. His tenacity,
kind-hearted nature, and professionalism is a temple of his character.
Wick and the legacy of the career he's built for himself. It will be sad to see the John Wick series end here, but also bittersweet.
The man is given his all to the action genre.
It was breathtaking to see him kick us one more time. One to 34, 56, 78. That was a pretty good fight, huh? Yo, I'll catch up to you, John. I know you weren't.
With that said, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone that requested we
John Wick
explore Chapter 4.
Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And if there's anything else you'd like for me to cover,
please don't hesitate to ask.